So for today's topic, we are taking notes on solving quadratics by factoring. There's the 2 pages here. We'll go through and do a couple of these together. But the basic part here for solving quadratics by factoring, you've got your directions, the 1, 2, 3, 4, your steps, I guess you could say. But for this here, we've got, in many cases, we can find the solutions or roots, zeros, or x-intercepts of a quadratic equation by factoring rather than graphing. Follow the steps below to find the solutions of the given equation by factoring. Okay, so we're going to do this by factoring, not graphing, because this is going to be a little bit easier for us to do. So we've got our steps here. Step 1, it says set the quadratic equation equal to 0. Okay, so here was our first example here. They gave us this information, and then we set it equal to 0. So there's my step 1. And then step 2, factor the left side. So we factored it out. Here's my step 2. We've got the x plus 5 and the x minus 2, and it's still equal to 0. And then step 3, set each factor equal to 0 and solve each factor for x. Solve for x. So that's what we did here. Here's my step 3. And then step 4, write your answer using the curly braces. Okay, so here's my step 4. That's your final answer, kind of like what we were doing the last few days with putting it in the little squiggly brackets. And I know they're hard to draw, so just try your best with drawing them. Sometimes I mess it up. It's okay. As long as we have an idea that you're giving me an attempt at drawing it. Okay, so let's go through and do a couple of these together here. We're going to use those steps. It's going to make a lot more sense. It's going to be a lot easier to understand as we're actually doing it. But this is very similar to just factoring like we did a couple weeks ago. You're just adding in like that extra step at the end where you set each factor to 0 and then solve, which we know how to do that. It's just like solving an equation. So this should hopefully be a fairly easy topic today and tomorrow. But your directions, it says solve the following quadratic equations by factoring. Let's first do number 1. I'm going to zoom in here. Let's do number 1 together first. We've got x squared, or x to the power of 2, plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, our first thing said set the quadratic equation equal to 0. It's already done for us. Then we can go on to step 2, which is factor the left side. So I'm going to draw my 2 sets of parentheses, and it's still equal to 0. And we know we're going to be dealing with the variable x. So here's my variable x, here's my variable x. We need to find 2 numbers. These 2 numbers, when you multiply them, they're going to be multiplied to a 3. So something times something equals 3. And then when you add those numbers together, something plus something, we get 4. So multiply to 3, add to 4. Okay, so for this, let's do 3 times 1, or positive 3 times positive 1. I see someone typed in there. Awesome. Thank you. Positive 3 times positive 1 is positive 3. That one works. And then when you add those numbers together, 3 plus 1 is positive 4. Perfect. So they both work. That was our second step. Our next step is set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So it's going to help if you draw like this line here to help us stay organized. I'm going to take this first factor in parentheses, this x plus 3, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. Okay, I'm also going to do on the other side, I'm going to take this x plus 1 and set this equal to 0. From there, we're going to solve for x. On the left side here, I'll do minus 3 on both sides. It's just like you're solving a normal equation. Most of them are just one step. And then now I've got my x equals, now it's negative 3. So I've got part of my answer here. Let's go ahead and solve this one on the right. So then I do minus 1 on both sides. So I've got x equals negative 1. So we've got 2 parts of our answer there. Now we just need to do step 4, writing your answer using the curly braces, or I like to call them the squiggly lines. So here's my x equals. We've got the squigglies. And when you're writing out your answers, you want to do them with the smallest number first. So if it was on a number line, the negative 3 would be further to the left than the negative 1. And then that is your final answer, okay? So all we're doing is factoring, setting those 2 factors equal to 0, and then solving that equation. Okay, and then we've got our answer there, the negative 3 comma negative 1. This is how you would write your final answer here. All of this stuff over here is how you show your work. So when you're doing this for your assignment tomorrow, I need to see all of this stuff here, showing all of your work, writing out your final answer, just like this we did here together. Okay, and yes, there's a million questions on here. We're not doing all of them. I'm going to skip around so we can kind of get the basics covered. Number 5, next one here, we'll do together, number 5. Okay, so step 1 is set the equation equal to 0, which that's done for us. Step 2 is now going to be factoring. Okay, we know we're dealing with the variable x, so here's my variable x, here's my variable x. Help me out with this one, guys, okay? What two numbers can multiply to 21, and then they add to a negative 10? What two numbers can we use when you multiply these two numbers? They multiply to a 21, but then when you add them together, we get a negative 10. You can go ahead and type that in the chat, or you can turn your microphone on. So I just want to get a little bit of help here from you guys. And this is factoring, which we've done this before. I see someone did a 7 and a 3. Let's try that out. Because we know 7 times 3 is 21. So that works. But if we add these together, let's say if it was a positive 7, positive 3, we would end up with a positive 10, but we need a negative 10. So I'm going to make these both negative. Negative 7, negative 3, add those together, and then we get a negative 10. So we're going to use a negative 7, negative 3. Awesome. And set this equal to 0. And I'm going to draw this little chart. This just helps me stay organized. It's just a visual thing to help us stay organized. And then we're going to go ahead and set each factor equal to 0. So I take my first set of parentheses, x minus 7, set that equal to 0. And then over here on the right, I have x minus 3 equals 0. All right, go ahead and if you were to solve these, I'm going to give you a couple seconds here. Tell me, what do you get for your two answers? X equals what and x equals what? What would be your two different solutions here? Tell me if it's a positive or a negative of that number. So go ahead and pretend like you're finishing solving these. Show your work on your paper here, or if you can do that in your head because it's fairly easy. It's just one step. That's fine. You can do it in your head. But go ahead and type in. Tell me the answers for these two here. You can type it in or turn your microphone on. I see someone said 7 and 3. They're both positive. Perfect, because we add 7 to both sides. Then we get x equals 7. There's 1. And then the other one, add 3 to both sides. So x equals positive 3. Okay, so that's our step 3. Step 4, you're going to use it with the squiggly brackets there, where we've got the smaller number written first, 3, comma, and then our bigger number, 7. And then there is your final answer there for number 5. Okay, so I know we've only done kind of like 2 examples together, but just kind of give me a little like estimate on how you guys feel on this so far. Like 1 to 5, 1 is I have no idea how to do this, and 5 is like I feel really good about this. This seems really easy. I think I could teach this by the end of this lesson. So I'm hoping you guys feel really confident about it so far, even though we've only done two actual problems together there. You can type those in. I can see your answers there. Awesome. Okay. So let's keep on going. Hopefully by the end of this, you guys feel even better than that. So that was number 5. Yeah. So there's 2 pages of our notes. Next one we'll do, here's number 9. Number 9 is our next one. We've got the x to the power of 2 minus 8x equals 0. Okay, just like our normal thing we've been doing here is following those same steps. Set the quadratic equation equal to 0. That's done for us already. And then step 2, factor the left side. Okay, so for this one, we only have 2 terms in here, so we're going to have to do a different kind of factoring than what we just did on those last couple of questions. This one, we're first going to need to find our GCF, our greatest common factor. So we're going to need to factor something out of this first. So for this one, here's our 1, and we've got a negative 8. Okay, so let's think here. What number, what coefficient can we factor out here? 1 divided by what, and 8 divided by what. If you're not sure, you can always take out a 1. So if we do that, let's go ahead and simplify. 1 divided by 1 is 1, and then negative 8 divided by 1 is negative 8. Okay, now let's look at our variables. Go ahead and tell me in the chat. Can I factor out a variable from number 9? And when you're doing this, we're only looking at this side here. Can I factor out a variable? Yes, I can. And the reason why is because we have them at every single term. Okay, so I'm going to factor out that variable x. You're going to take out the smallest exponent, and for this one, it's just x to the power of 1. Now let's go ahead and simplify. We've got x to the power of 2 divided by x to the power of 1. Just subtract your exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. And then our next one, x to the power of 1 divided by x to the power of 1. Subtract your exponents. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, so we factored it out. I'm going to set this equal to 0. And let's clean this up a little bit. This first one here, we can erase the coefficient of 1 because that is invisible, and so is the exponent of 1. Those are both invisible. Our next one here, same thing. The coefficient of 1 is invisible, and the exponent of 1 is invisible. And then our last one here, anything to the power of 0 is equal to what? Go ahead and tell me in the chat. Anything to the power of 0 is equal to 1. Perfect. So I'm going to set this to a times 1. And then anything times 1, or you can even look at this one here, negative 8 times 1 is just going to be that negative 8. Okay, so when you're factoring, if you can go straight to this, if you just know that you can take out an x, and then you're left with an x, and then take out an x, you're left with a negative 8, that's fine. I don't need to see all those extra steps in there where you go through and erase it. I just like to show every single step to show us how we're getting there. Okay, and then from there, that was step 2, factor the left side. Step 3, set each factor equal to 0. So again, we're still going to do our little piece of organization. I'm going to draw my line down the middle to split it up. Okay, so we've got the x is one factor, and then the x minus 8 is another factor. I'm going to set this x equals 0, and then the other one here, x minus 8 equals 0. And then we solve. This one over here on the left, it already says x equals 0. So there's nothing else for us to do there. It's already solved for 0. So there's part of our answer. Now I'm going to solve this other one. Add 8 to both sides. So then I've got x equals 8. We've got our 2 answers. Now we can do step 4. Write your answer using the curly braces. X equals, we've got 0 and 8. And there you go. That's your final answer there for number 9. Okay. Let's keep on going. That was number 9. I'm going to skip a couple. Let's do number 15. Number 15. So following our steps. Step 1, set the quadratic equation equal to 0. That's done for us already. Step 2, factor the left side. Okay, so for this one, we're going to factor it out kind of like what we've been doing, set it equal to 0. This one is one of our perfect squares. So it's kind of like you're finding the square root of the first term and you're finding the square root of that second term. So here's our first one. Let's think. What times what, same thing, would be the 4x squared? Or you can even break it up and do just the numbers first, then the variable. So let's break this one up, okay? So go ahead and tell me in the chat or turn your microphone on. What is the square root of 4? 2. Perfect. So here's my 2. Here's my 2. Awesome. Now let's go one step further and let's do our variable. What would be the square root of x to the power of 2? Or you can think, what times what is x to the power of 2? So remember, when you're taking the square root of a variable with an exponent, all you do is take that variable, you're going to put it in both spots, and then we're just going to cut it in half. We're going to divide it by 2, our exponent. So we take the exponent of 2, divide it by 2, so then both of them have an exponent of 1. Because if you were to multiply 2x to the power of 1 times 2x to the power of 1, you get 4x, and then you add your exponents to the power of 2. Okay, so there's our first one. Let's go ahead and do our second term, this 81. We're not going to look at the sign yet. So help me out here. What times what is 81? Or what is the square root of 81? And you can type that in the chat or turn your microphone on. I see a 9. Perfect. So we got 9 and 9. Okay. There's no variables there, so that one's a little bit easier. So let's look at these here. We've got 2x to the power of 1, 9, 2x to the power of 1, 9. They should be the same because they're both perfect squares. The only thing that's different is one of them gets a plus sign, and then the other one gets a minus sign. Okay, and then let's clean it up here. If we can erase the exponent of 1 for both of these, and then we are all cleaned up. Now let's go on to our next step. That was step 2, factor each side. Now step 3 is set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to help myself with organizing, drawing my table. I take the first factor, the 2x plus 9, set this equal to 0, and then my other one inside the parentheses, 2x minus 9 equal to 0. And then we solve. These ones have 2 steps. It's going to take you a little bit more time to get your answer there. So our first one here on the left, first thing I'm going to do, minus 9 on both sides. So those cancel out. 2x equals negative 9. Okay, I want to solve for x, so I've got to do one more step. If you read this as 2 times x, we're going to do the opposite, divide by 2 on both sides. So then I've got x equals this negative 9 over 2. I cannot divide, I cannot simplify, so I'm just going to rewrite negative 9 over 2. And then we've got part of our answer there. We just got to do the same thing to the other side, solve for x. So this second one over here, add 9 to both sides. So we've got 2x equals 9. And then we need to get rid of that 2. Same thing, you read it as 2 times x. So I'm going to do the opposite, divide by 2. So then we've got x equals this 9 over 2. 9 divided by 2, I cannot divide that and get a nice whole number. So I'm just going to leave it as a fraction, 9 over 2. Then we've got the other half of our answer. Okay. Then we go on to step 4, write your answer using the curly braces. This is probably the easiest step, x equals, and then you're putting it like you would on a number line, smallest one first, then the bigger one. We've got a negative 9 over 2 and a positive 9 over 2. So here's my negative 9 over 2 and then the positive 9 over 2. And then there you go. You are all finished with number 15. That's your final answer there. Okay. Let's keep on going. Couple more questions. So far, all of the ones that we've done were in standard form. They were already equal to 0. But now we're going to work on equations that are not in standard form. So you're going to first need to move something, then you can factor, then you can solve it. So let's do number 17. You can see number 17, it's actually equal to 21. We need to first set it equal to 0. So I want to get a 0 over here. So I'm going to move this positive 21 to the other side. So I'll do minus 21 on both sides. Okay, so those cancel out. That means there's nothing left. Okay, what number is nothing if you have nothing in your bank account? 0. Okay, so that ends up going out to 0. And then all the rest of this here, we've got x to the power of 2, a positive 4x, oops, and a negative 21. None of those can be combined. They're all different. They're not like terms. So I'm going to put them side by side in standard form. Highest exponent first. So here's my x to the power of 2, then the positive 4x, then the minus 21. Okay, so that was my first step, set it equal to 0. So that was my step 1. Going on to step 2 is factor the left side. So I've got my 2 sets of parentheses equal to 0. I know I'm dealing with the variable x. Okay, help me out here. What 2 numbers multiply to a negative 21 and add to 4? Go ahead and type in the chat or turn your microphone on. What 2 numbers can I use, multiply to negative 21 and add to 4? And it's got to be, there's one's positive and one is negative. So I don't think we have many options for multiplying to 21, but I do know that 7 times, whoops, that's probably the first one that popped in all of your brain. 7 times 3 is 21. Okay, so we've got a negative 21. One of them needs to be positive, one of them needs to be negative. A little trick here is you can see that the 4 is positive. So that means between these 2 numbers here, the 7 and the 3, the bigger number needs to be positive and the smaller number needs to be negative. So if you're adding together B is positive, that means for your factoring part, the bigger number needs to be positive, because if we combine these 2 numbers together, 7 plus a negative 3, we end up with a positive 4. And then we know that if we multiply those numbers, 7 times negative 3, we get a negative 21. Okay, that was step 2. Now let's do step 3. We're going to set each factor equal to 0. Got the x plus 7 equal to 0 and the x minus 3 equals 0. And then we're going to solve for x, so minus 7. So x equals negative 7. There's part of our answer. And then over here, add 3. So x equals 3. That was step 3. Then we've got step 4. Put it in the squiggly brackets. We're going to do the smaller number first. So first is negative 7, then the positive 3. And then there would be your final answer there for number 17. Okay, let's do maybe one more question together here. Number 21. 21. Okay. So first thing we want to do is set the factor, or set the whole problem equal to 0. Okay, and just to keep it consistent like we've been doing, the 0 has always been on the right side. So let's do the same thing here. Let's end up with the 0 on the right side. Okay, so we've got, actually, let's see here. We've got 11x to the power of 2. And we also have this x to the power of 2. They're on different sides. So let's move this x to the power of 2 first. Let's move that one first. This is currently a positive 1x to the power of 2. So I'm going to move it to the other side, do the opposite. Minus 1x to the power of 2. And then over here, minus 1x to the power of 2. So those cancel out. And then over here on the left, we can simplify, we can subtract because they are like terms. So just combine your coefficients. 11 minus 1 is 10. And then I've got x to the power of 2. Bring down my equal sign and this 8x. Okay. From there, we want to move this 8x to the other side. It is a positive 8x. So I'm going to do the opposite. Minus 8x on both sides. Let's simplify the left side here. Can I put these together, or do I need to put them side by side? The 10x to the power of 2 and the negative 8x. Can I combine them, or should I put them side by side? Side by side, perfect, because they are not like terms. So putting it in standard form, first is the 10x to the power of 2, then the negative 8x. And these canceled out. There's nothing left, but I need to put a number there. What number can I put under the positive 8x, negative 8x? Or what can I put on the other side of that equal sign since there's nothing left? Think about if you had your bank account, your wallet, you had no money in it, there's nothing in there. What number 0. Perfect. So we got a 0. Okay, so we just did step 1, which was set the equation equal to 0. Now step 2, factor out the left side. For this one, it's going to be kind of like one other problem that we did, where we're actually going to need to find a GCF. So we're only going to need one set of parentheses, setting it equal to 0. Okay, so let's look at just our numbers first. Just our numbers. What number can I factor out here? Think 10 divided by what? And 8 divided by what? What's the biggest number that I can take out of here that I can divide both of those by? GCF, greatest common factor. You can type that in the chat or you can turn your microphone on. But help me out with this one. 10 divided by what? And 8 divided by what? What's the biggest number I can take out? So for this one, they're both even numbers. So let's go ahead and take out a 2. So let's factor. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Okay, now let's look at our variables. We know that we can take out the variable x. I'm going to take out my variable x, and it's the smallest exponent to the power of 1. Okay, so I took out x to the power of 1. Now let's simplify. X to the power of 2 divided by x to the power of 1. Subtract your exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. Now let's look at my other variable. X to the power of 1 divided by x to the power of 1. What's my new exponent for the x here? What's my new exponent for x? When you're dividing your variables and exponents, all you do is subtract the exponents. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, let's go ahead and clean this up if we can. Awesome, I see the answers there. Perfect, thank you. So for here, this first term, I can erase the exponent of 1. That's invisible. This second term here, I can erase the exponent of 1 because that's invisible. And then my last term here, we've got the x to the power of 0. We know that anything to the power of 0 is really equal to 1. So then we've got a times 1. And then anything times 1 is that anything. Or you can even just do the multiplication one step further. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. So then we just did our step 2 right there, factor the left side. It's all cleaned up. So now we can go on to step 3. Step 3 is set each factor equal to 0. So I'm going to organize, take this to x, set this equal to 0. And over here, 5x minus 4 equals 0. And then we're going to finish solving these ones here. I want to solve for x over here on the left, so I'm going to get rid of this 2. We read that as 2 times x, so I'll do the opposite, divide by 2. So then I've got x equals 0 divided by any number is always just 0. So there's part of our answer. And then over here on the right, it's just a 2-step equation. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So then I've got 5x equals 4. And then we need to go one step further, divide by 5. So x equals this 4 over 5. I cannot simplify anymore, so I'm just going to rewrite 4 over 5. So there's the other part of our answer. That was step 3. Now we'll do step 4, which is to put it with the squiggly curly brackets. Step 4 over here. X equals, we've got our squigglies. Smaller number first, here's the 0, then that fraction 4 over 5. And then there's your final answer there. Okay, so that is your notes. I know I skipped some. If you need more practice, need more help with it, try and finish the rest of these notes here on your own, or you can send me a message and we can work on it together. But I don't need a picture of your notes for this today. But make sure that you feel confident with this enough to be able to do it on your own for the assignment tomorrow. But that is it for today. So if you have no questions for me, you can go ahead and log off and we'll have our assignment tomorrow. But if you have questions, I'll stay here for a few more minutes and help you guys out with that. Just make sure before you leave, you type something in the chat. Okay, so if you're leaving, bye, have a good day.